This is Mr. Wesley, and today we are talking about the moment the arguing stopped, and why that silence was not the beginning of peace, but the beginning of the end. You remember when it stopped. Maybe it was a Tuesday. Maybe it was after a holiday that went badly, or after a conversation that went in circles for the 100th time and landed nowhere again. And then one morning you woke up and she did not bring it up. She did not push. She did not needle. She did not sigh in that particular way that used to make your jaw tighten before you had even poured your first cup of coffee, and something in you quietly exhaled. You thought, finally. Maybe we have turned a corner. Maybe she has let it go. Maybe things are going to be easier now. That exhale may have been the most expensive breath you ever took. Because in a few minutes I am going to tell you exactly what that silence meant. Not what you hoped it meant, not what it looked like on the surface, but what was actually happening on her side of the house during those quiet months while you were relieved. I am going to give you a specific framework for reading female emotional withdrawal that most men only encounter after it is too late to use it. But first you need to understand something about how women process the decision to leave. Because it does not work the way men assume it does. And that assumption is precisely what costs men like you everything. I am Mr. Wesley. I have spent years sitting with men who are navigating marriage failure, divorce, and the long road back to themselves afterward. The men I work with are not weak men. They are not careless men. Most of them are men who tried hard, who provided, who showed up, and who still ended up blindsided. This channel exists because blindsided is not inevitable. The pattern is readable. You just need someone to show you what to look for. Now let me show you. The first thing you need to understand is what researchers who study marital dissolution call the demand-withdrawal cycle. This is not an abstract concept. You have lived it. One partner brings a complaint or a need. She raises the issue. She expresses dissatisfaction. She asks for something to change. The other partner, and in most marriages over 50, this is the man, responds by withdrawing, not maliciously, not cruelly. You withdrew because the conversation felt like an attack, because nothing you said seemed to land correctly, because every attempt to resolve it seemed to make it worse. So you went quiet. You changed the subject. You waited for it to pass. And it did pass. It always passed. Until it stopped passing and something else happened instead. The demand-withdrawal cycle has a third stage that nobody talks about. The research calls it withdrawal-withdrawal. It is the stage where she stops demanding, where the complaints dry up, where the sighing stops, where she becomes, in the language of the research, emotionally disengaged. And here is what the data shows. By the time a woman reaches withdrawal-withdrawal in a long marriage, she has typically been processing the decision to leave for an average of 2 years. 2 years. She has been running the calculation quietly, privately, behind the day-to-day surface of the marriage. While you were living in what felt like an improved situation, she was not letting it go. She was finishing the math. Picture this. There is a man I know, I will call him Daniel, who was married for 24 years. He described his marriage in the 2 years before his wife asked for a divorce as the best stretch they had had in a long time. She was calmer, less reactive. She had started going to the gym, spending more time with her friends, taking a pottery class on Thursday evenings. He told me he had assumed she was happier. He had assumed whatever had been wrong was working itself out. He told me he felt, for the first time in years, like they might actually make it. 3 months after that thought, she handed him a piece of paper and told him she had already spoken to an attorney. What Daniel experienced has a name. It is called the Detachment Phase, and it is the most misread chapter in the entire arc of a failing marriage. The Detachment Phase begins the moment a woman makes a private decision, not necessarily a final decision, but a preliminary one, that the marriage may not be salvageable. Before that moment, her emotional energy is still invested in the marriage, which is why she is still fighting. Fighting is investment. Anger is investment. The complaint and the sigh and the argument that goes in circles, all of that is a woman who still believes that something could change if she could just get through to you. The fighting is not the problem. The fighting is the proof that she has not given up. When she gives up, she goes quiet. And she goes quiet in a very specific way. Not hostile quiet, not cold shoulder quiet. She goes calm, cooperative, pleasantly distant. She stops bringing up the grievances not because they are resolved, but because she has moved them off the table that the two of you share and onto a private table she is setting for one. She starts investing her emotional energy elsewhere, in friendships, in personal projects, in a version of herself that does not depend on you to function. She is not doing this to punish you. She is doing this because she is preparing. She is building the internal scaffolding she will need for a life she is already beginning to design in her mind. This is the moment you thought was peace. Now, I want to stay here with you for a moment before we move forward, because I know what some of you are carrying as you listen to this. Some of you recognize Daniel's story not as something that happened to someone else, but as something that is happening to you right now. Some of you heard the description of the calm, the pottery class, the pleasant distance, and felt something shift in your chest because that is your Tuesday evening. That is your kitchen. That is the woman sitting across from you at dinner who seems fine, who says she is fine, who has stopped telling you what is wrong, and I want to acknowledge what it costs to sit with that recognition. Because the cruelest thing about the detachment phase is that it punishes the exact quality that most men over 50 were raised to value, the ability to keep the peace. You were not ignoring her, you were not being careless, you were doing what decades of experience had taught you to do. You were reading the absence of conflict as the presence of stability, because for most of the men in this room, that is what you were shown. That is the marital model you inherited. Conflict is the problem. Quiet is the solution. And now someone is telling you that the quiet was the emergency. That is not your failure of character. That is a failure of information. And that distinction matters. Let me give you the second framework. Because pattern recognition only helps you if it is specific enough to use. There is a concept in attachment research called deactivating strategies. When a person with an avoidant attachment pattern, and many men over 50, for reasons we can get into another time, carry avoidant tendencies, when that person is faced with emotional demand they do not know how to meet, they deactivate. They reduce the emotional temperature of the situation by withdrawing, minimizing, or distracting. The intention is not to hurt. The intention is to manage something that feels unmanageable, but the effect, over years, is that the other person in the relationship stops trusting that their emotional experience will be received. And when that trust is gone, she stops offering her emotional experience to you. She stops fighting not because the issues are resolved, but because she has concluded that offering them to you costs more than it returns. The detachment phase is what happens after years of deactivating strategies have taught her that the door you are standing behind does not open from the inside. Now here's what I promised you at the beginning of this conversation. Here is the specific, usable framework. There are 4 observable behavioral markers that distinguish genuine improvement in a marriage from the false calm of the detachment phase. I want you to hold these 4 things in mind and map them honestly against what you are seeing in your own home. The first marker is the direction of her investment. In genuine improvement, a woman's increased calm is accompanied by increased investment in the shared life. She is making plans that include you, she is initiating contact more, she is curious about your interior experience. In the detachment phase, the calm is accompanied by investment that flows away from the marriage. She is building something that does not require your participation. The calm and the outward investment are not contradictory. They are the 2 visible signs of the same internal process. The second marker is how she responds to repair attempts. A repair attempt is any gesture, however small, that tries to reconnect or improve the emotional atmosphere between 2 people. A joke, a touch, a question about her day that is actually curious rather than habitual. In a marriage with life in it, repair attempts are received. She softens. She responds. In the detachment phase, repair attempts are met with what researchers call flat effect. She is not hostile. She is not warm. She accepts the gesture without it landing anywhere. You can feel it. It is the particular hollowness of a kindness that did not reach the person you offered it to. The third marker is whether she is still asking anything of you. This is the one that men most consistently miss. We tend to experience her asking nothing of us as relief. But a woman who is still emotionally present in a marriage still has needs she is directing at you, even if those needs are frustrating, even if the way she voices them is imperfect. The day she stops asking you for anything, stops asking you to change, stops asking you to notice something, stops asking you to show up differently, that is not the day she became content. That is the day she redirected all of her asking toward a future that does not have you in the primary role. The fourth marker is physical, not necessarily in the bedroom, though that is often part of it. The physical marker is what happens to her body when you enter a room. In a marriage with emotional life remaining, there is still a response, positive or negative, warm or tense, but a response. The detachment phase produces a particular quality of physical neutrality. You walk in, and her body does not register you as significant. You are present, but not felt. That neutrality, that specific absence of reaction, is the physical signature of a woman who has completed more of the internal transition than most men realize is possible, while 2 people are still sharing a house. You can walk through your own home right now and ask those 4 questions. Where is her investment flowing? How does she receive your repair attempts? What is she still asking of you? How does her body respond when you enter? The answers will tell you more about where your marriage actually is than any conversation you have had in the last 2 years. Now, what do you do with this? I am not going to tell you that the detachment phase is irreversible, because for some men it is not. There is a body of research on what therapists call emotional re-engagement, and it is real, and it is possible. And if that is the road you want to take, I will address it in a future video with the specificity it deserves. What I will tell you today is this. The worst thing you can do with this information is use it to perform. To suddenly become attentive in a way that is legible as strategy. Women who are in the detachment phase have extraordinarily sensitive radar for effort that is motivated by fear of loss rather than genuine presence. If what shifts in you is anxiety, she will feel the anxiety, and it will confirm the conclusion she has already been moving toward. The only thing that has a chance of interrupting the detachment phase is not a performance of change. It is actual presence. Actual curiosity about her interior experience. Actual willingness to receive what she has to say without making it about your defense. Whether you have the time, the energy, and the will to do that is a question only you can answer, and the answer is not a moral judgment. Some marriages are too far gone. Some men have already done the math on their side and arrived at a conclusion that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with clarity. There is no shame in that either. But you deserve to make that decision with accurate information. Not with the comfortable misreading that the quiet means things are fine. Because a man who knows what the quiet actually means can make a real choice. And a man who makes a real choice, whatever that choice is a man who does not spend the next decade asking himself why he did not see it coming. That is what this channel is for. The most expensive silence in a marriage is not the one that comes from cruelty. It is the one that gets mistaken for peace. Drop a comment. Men, do you remember the specific moment the argument stopped in your marriage? And when you look back now, do you understand it differently than you did at the time? Subscribe to Relational Insights. Every week, Mr. Wesley breaks down the patterns inside marriage failure, divorce, and what comes after, with a kind of clarity that most men only find after it is already too late.